All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us, both in person and online. My name is Marshall Reed. I'm the program manager here at GTI, and really excited to be here with all of you today for what promises to be a really great and important conversation. So GTI, for everybody who's not aware, is a 501c3 think tank that is really the only think tank based in DC that's exclusively focused on Taiwan and study of Taiwan, its people, its culture, and its place in the world. So through our programs, what we aim to do is really expand the conversation around Taiwan and really contribute to a sort of a more nuanced, more expansive conversation through discussion of its people, its place in the world. We have a range of different programs that really try to cover that conversation as much as possible. We've got our fortnightly publication of Global Taiwan Brief, frequent public seminars like this. We have 3 podcasts, a variety of cultural programs like film festivals and cooking classes. We have our annual symposium, and for people who are interested in studying, doing research in Taiwan, we also offer scholarships and fellowships on a monthly basis. So if anybody is interested in learning more about GTI, what we do, I definitely encourage you to check out our website. It's www.globaltaiwan.org. So before we jump into today's discussion, which again, I'm very excited about, I'd really be remiss if I didn't offer a couple thank yous. First to, our co-founders, our advisors, our donors, who really, facilitate all this, who make it all possible. And obviously, I'd also like to thank our staff, our interns who are here with us today, who really do make these events possible. I'd also obviously like to thank our guests who came a very, very long way from the Memorial Foundation of 228, who I know are tired from their long trip, but I'm very excited to speak with you today about what promises to be a really important and timely topic. So thank you to all for your work and for coming this far. I also want to, before we really get started, to take a moment to draw attention to the most recent work by the Memorial Foundation of 228, which is the tragedy of 228, historical truth and transitional justice in Taiwan, which, again, if anybody is interested in learning more about this important topic, is interested in the history of Taiwan during the White Terror period, I think it's a fantastic resource. I definitely encourage you to check it out. So really to kick things off, I'm really excited to introduce pre-recorded remarks from Memorial Foundation of 228 Chairman Shui Huayuan, who also served as editor-in-chief of the tragedy of 228. So we can point to that now.
切的关系。我想这也是今天我们在这里举办这个论坛非常 重要的原因。透过这个论坛的举办，可以让更多关心台湾、爱护台湾的，包括台湾的同胞，还有国外的友人，可以对228事件有所了解。更重要的是，在自由、民主、人权这个台湾与美国以及先进民主国家的共同价值之下，共同为台湾在国际的地位及未来的发展投入更多的关注还有努力。这样重要的盛会，我本来应该亲自来参与，那拜托本会的董事，也是前台湾教授协会的会长许文堂教授率团来参加这一场会议，这一点实在非常的抱歉，也请各位与会的贵宾可以谅解。非常期盼这一次论坛的举行，可以开启228基金会与 GTI 长期合作的契机，那也共同为我们关心的台湾的未来付出我们的心力。在这里，我预祝今天的论坛顺利成功，谢谢。
All right. Well, thank you to Chairman Chua for really setting the stage for us. I mean, I certainly understand why he can't be here with us today, but we do thank him for his remarks. And again, before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about why this event is so important, why we're so excited to be here. Here at GTI, I think we typically tend to focus on kind of really current events. We talk a lot about Taiwan's place in the world. We talk about Taiwan's security situation, its economic situation. I think from that perspective, from an outside perspective, talking about the 228 incident, talking about history, might seem to be a little outside of our standard, current affairs mandate. But I think, as I'm sure all our guests today will really make clear, and as Chairman Chua just really made clear, the 228 incident is far more than just some distant historical memory. This is not something that has been forgotten. This is, even 75 years on, the incident, as well as the White Terror that followed it, remains a critical part of the modern Taiwanese experience. It is still being, impacting Taiwanese politics. It's still being discussed today. Even as Taiwan has emerged from, an authoritarian state and has really succeeded in becoming one of the world's, foremost pluralistic democracies, it's still having to reckon with that, authoritarian past that shaped it for so long. And, through this process of transitional justice, which we're going to talk about today, and this is the primary goal of 2017's Act on Promoting Transitional Justice, which subsequently allowed for the creation of the Transitional Justice Commission, which I'm sure we'll discuss as well today. During its existence from 2018 to 2022, the commission really did a lot of work to shed light on past wrongs, to correct injustices, and really just in general promote transparency and kind of push back against ignorance. So this process really coincided and intertwined with the work of so much of Taiwan's incredible civil society, including, obviously groups like the Memorial Foundation for 228, who really provide this kind of indispensable research help, this really incredible support. So I think this book right here is really a testament to those efforts and show how those can kind of be mutually reinforcing. So before we get started, I really want to build on what Chairman Chua said and read a quote from the preface of the book that I think encapsulates why this conversation is so important. And I think it really is kind of a thesis statement for what we're going to talk about. So from the preface, this effort is not only helpful for reckoning with the past, it's also beneficial for the future of the Taiwanese people. Values of freedom, democracy, and human rights are critical for enhancing Taiwan's soft power in the present day. Research into transitional justice not only allows for re-examination of historical events, it can also increase awareness among the people so they may learn from the lessons of history and work together to defend these important values. In this way, we may avoid future incidents of violations of human rights by improper state power, such as the 228 incident, and ensure that these values are not removed. This can only be achieved through the efforts of all the people. So again, with that in mind, I want to turn now and, in my time and turn over to our fantastic panel today, who I just want to quickly introduce. So first, we'll hear from Dr. Chen Hao, who is an associate research fellow at the Memorial Foundation of 228. He's also an adjunct assistant professor at the Graduate Institute of Taiwan History at National Chengde University, where he also got his PhD. Following that, we're going to turn to Dr. Shou Wentang, the director of the Memorial Foundation of 228. He's also an associate research fellow of the Institute of Modern History at Academia Sinica and earned his PhD from the University of Paris Diderot. Finally, as discussed, we're really lucky to be joined by a friend of GTI, Michael Fonte, who is the head of the Democratic Progressive Party mission in DC. In addition to his work with the DPP, Mike has also served in lots of other positions, including with the Formosan Association for Public Affairs and the Council for a Livable World Education Fund. Before we get started, one last thing. For anybody watching online and for all of you here in person, we want this to be a conversation. We want you guys to participate as well. So if you do have questions for the panel, we encourage you to either raise your hand in here, or if you're online, to submit questions in our YouTube chat box by sending them to contact@globaltaiwan.org or by tweeting @globaltaiwan. So with that in mind, Dr. Chen, over to you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Dear Marshall, very thanks for your kindly introduction. And I think I'm very, of course, it's a very great pleasure to me to have the opportunity to introduce you the newly released book of course, Marshall mentioned. It has promoted this book several times in the earlier opening speech. This book, our foundation, published this book in 2000 in the previous year, 2022, and so we are very glad to have the opportunity to introduce this newly released book to all of you. And I'm totally agreed with the Marshall's speaking. I think today we are not only talking about the past, the history. The more important is through this history, we can help us to think about current Taiwan and where we should go and how we should, the Taiwanese people, the people of Taiwan, we think different ethnic Chinese people, I mean, Icelanders, Bonsenren, or Weissenren, mainlanders who come from mainland China to Taiwan in the after 1949, or even the new immigrants from Southeast Asia in the recent years. We should unite together to fight with our threat, or we can more precisely say our enemy. Okay, so the today's exactly every year in Taiwan we commemorating this event not to remember a past massacre, but also such kind of memory events also can help Taiwanese society to become more, become more solidly, become more work together to unite together to fight with the mainland China. So I think this is a very important issue, and we Taiwanese people very proud of our liberty, democracy, and human rights. We think this is our very important soft power to against our outside threat. Okay, so very thanks for your coming. And okay, please next slide. Okay, so our foundation was established in the 1994. Was founded by our government. So yeah, until today, the situation was the same. We are funded by our government. So okay, so and our foundation was established according to a special legislation addressing the aftermath of the Chengde incident. So before the 2000s, the main mission of our foundation was to launch the compensation to those victims and their families. But now our foundation was focused on research about the transitional justice, and our foundation also run the National 228 Memorial Museum. And so if you guys have opportunity to come visit Taiwan, please contact us and we will arrange you a very excellent, impressive historical tour or traditional tour in our beautiful museum. Okay, so this is our foundation. Next slide, please. Thanks. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, in the recent years, our foundation major focus on the research on the transitional justice for the total instance. And for in order to achieve this goal, so our foundation have set a research team in 2007. And the research team named Truth and the Transitional Justice of the Total Instant. And the leader of the team was our chairperson, which have already give you the Professor Xue Haoyuan. Okay, and they have already give you a very impressive marks already. So this book exactly is the research result of this team. And this team do the research, based on the newly earthed historical materials. Until today, there are we still found that there are still some historical materials related to the total instances not unearthed, was close to, for example, to the KMT historical to the KMT historical archives office, okay, 党史会, or in some military organs. So also we still work very hard to try to find out those historical materials. Try to make those historical materials, more and more historical materials to be unearthed, and we use those newly unearthed historical materials to explore those aspects which was overlooked by the previous studies. Right, the next slide, please. So okay, so this is why we publish book, or this is the very important background. We publish this book, okay, this English book. And I also would like to highlight a very important background about why we publish book, or why we set a research team, or which you mentioned earlier, and we work so hard to produce the books. This was because our president, Tsai Ing-wen, he attended the national memorial ceremony to mark the 71st anniversary of the total instant. Okay, he stated the Taiwanese transitional justice investigation must meet the international standards. So this inspire our foundation to next slide is to launch a very large scale translation project. This means exactly the right hand side of the slide is the research results of a research team which mentioned early, and the research results. Okay, you can say this is a research report. Originally, was written in Chinese and published in 2020. But in order to respond to Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen's statements or expectation, so after we published this book, we right away launched the translation project. So the first result of the translation project was the Japanese edition of this book. Okay, we select some papers and translate into Japanese and publish this book in Japan. Okay, next slide. And then the main goal of the translation, of course, is the English version. We did so. That was because that was only because the English is an international language. But also more important factor is the executive. The study regarding the tutor instance was initiated by the economic English academic group. So more precisely, was initiated by American academics right here. Okay, next slide, please. So so if you take a look about the review of the English studies regarding the tutor instance, you will find that the first book related to the tutor instance exactly was published in the United States, was written by a very famous historical figure, George Kerr. George Kerr was an Taiwanese expert, and he possesses a very rich experience staying Taiwan. First he raised to Taiwan was in 1937, and stayed about 3 years in Taipei for English teaching. At that time, Taiwan was still ruled by the Japanese Empire. I mean, at that time, Taiwan was still a colony of the Japanese Empire. And then, after World War II ended, he returned to United States, and then he returned to Taiwan again to serve as the vice consul in Taipei Consulate during the 1946 to the 1947. So this is important because tutor incident was happened in the 1947. Okay, and Taiwan was took over by the KMT government in the officially was in the October of the 1945. So the Judge Kerr, he had opportunity to witness how come the KMT took over Taiwan, and how come why the tutor incident happened. He witnessed those historical background, and he witnessed the historical things. Okay, he even witness the KMT troops fire their gun in the Taipei streets. So after he back to United States, he tried to publish the book to talk about what he seen when he stayed in Taiwan. And this was the book Formosa Betrayed. This book very sharply criticized the KMT government. And here's very important of this book is because, as you know, in Taiwan, you cannot talk about tutor incident in public until the martial law was lifted in 1987. That means in Taiwan, you know, it is possible that you can understand the tutor incident in the domestic of Taiwan. So you only have to, so this book become an important channel for understanding the tutor incident, okay, during the martial law period of Taiwan. And this is another more important issue is since you cannot public talk about the tutor incident in Taiwan during martial law, so those events which commemorating the tutor incident can only be held in the overseas, in the United States, in Japan, and held by those overseas Taiwanese people. Okay, in the 1970s, in the 1970s, in the 1980s. So this book founded a foundation for commemorating the Tuesday incident. Okay, during the Taiwanese martial law period, and as you know, the Tuesday incident, the commemorating event regarding to the Tuesday incident, and gradually intertwined with the Taiwan independence movement. So this book also lay a foundation for the pursuing the Taiwan independence. Okay. So this is a very important book, and this is why we're here to talk about the Tuesday instance. Okay. So okay, thanks. So the American academic also have another very important contribution to the Tuesday instance studies. The first economic book also published in the United States in 1991. And this book was accepted the peer review process by the very famous university, Stanford University. And exactly this book was published by 3 authors. I introduced their background here. And first is Roman Mayers, and Lai Zehai and Wei. I would like to highlight the background of the Lai Zehai and Wei, and you can realize what happened with this book. Lai Zehai was get his PhD in the United States from the University of Illinois. And then he back to Taiwan. He served as a physician. He worked at the academia sinica. Professor Xuan also come from academia sinica. Yeah. So, but the more important information is Lai Zehai was he was as a research fellow at Institute of Sanmin主义. I mean 3 people principal. So he's a pro-KMT scholars. And the other author was Wei. He was the former vice chairperson of cultural work committee of KMT. So this book, this was why. So when following this book published, and you can you will find that some scholars criticize this book was this book seems like very pro-KMT argument. This book seems like very play a very important role to defend the KMT's historical narratives. Okay, so this is why we had to publish this book, because in the past 30 years, you simply cannot find a second academic book related to the incident. So this means if you are in the United States, or you want to find a English writing book related to the English related to the incident, you only can read this book at church beginning. So we think we have to contribute ourselves to review the English the narrative about the Tuesday incident. Okay, among the English studies. Okay, so we will work so hard to publish this book. Through this book, you will read a totally different historical narrative. And you will find those very interesting materials. For example, in this book, we use a lot of historical materials come from intelligence agency, come from the CIA in Taiwan. Yeah, so you will find a very you will realize some historical truths which was covered in the long term past. Okay, next. So these books explore several dimensions which was overlooked in the past studies. So first, this book give you to try to answer a very important question about why the incident happened, triggered by a small cigarette issue. And then we give you an international context. We give you an institutional aspect. We give you a societal aspect. And we talk about the 2A rehabilitation movement. And in this part of discussion, you will found the relation between Taiwan and the rest of the world, and the relation between Taiwan and the United States. How United States, how the 2A instance, the commemorating event held in the United States, play a very important factor, or how Taiwan was, how Taiwanese people was influenced by those 2A rehabilitation movements, which are held in the United States. So today, I would like to shorten my presentation. Of course, later I highly recommendation you to pay attention to Professor Xu Tang's speech. He will give you a major in international context. We will talk about the legal status of Taiwan during the 2A incident and after the 2A incident, and this issue was very close to current Taiwan. So okay, so this is my shortened presentation, and I hope you can enjoy today's event. And we are very. I am the editor of this book. Okay, so personally, I'm very looking forward to talk about. If you are any interesting issues or you have any comment about this book, I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Thank you. Cool. Well, Dr. Chen, thank you for giving us such a great overview and just kicking things off for us and showing why this is important. That it's amazing. This is a critical event in Taiwanese history that has largely been uncovered for years. So clear why books like this are important. So Dr. Shaw, I want to turn to you now for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Good afternoon, everybody. Mr. Schulentang. I just verified the book. It's edited by Memorial Foundation of 2A. I'm happy to see that. Because in Chinese, it's entitled 2A事件 2A incident. Personally, I prefer to use 2A method because this is the origin of the injustice in post-war Taiwan. It's ongoing injustice that has lasted for more than 7 decades. Many people were massacred. We don't know exactly the numbers. In 1992, the governmental report say there is 28,000 persons were killed. But somebody argued there's more. Many disputed while their family member has been waiting for their return and endure the loss of education and the job opportunity. Many were traumatized and silenced. They even forced Taiwanese people to ponder two questions about their futures. First, the Taiwanese people's human rights and the civil rights recognized by the Chinese who hold the Sinocentric mindset. Second, is the Taiwanese share the same experience and the culture as those of the Chinese people? The answer to both questions are no. Taiwanese people thus develop their Taiwanese identity and constantly look for liberty and democracy. That's been after 50 years of colonization by Japanese. When Chinese troops come to Taiwan in 1945, honestly, the people of Taiwanese welcome the Chinese troops. But quickly, they found the government, the Chinese government officials are corrupt and incapable to govern the scenes. So 1 year after, it's the outbreak of the 228 massacre. Quite numerous because I cannot speak the English. In KMT and many supporters who are still today, who are still in the administration, have constituted the very obstacle to the revelation of the truth. They conceal materials and whitewashing the past. In 1970s, there is a campaign of wipe the dust. That's mean washing the archive by KMT. So there's no textbook in K-12 education mentioned the 228 massacre until the 90s. Today, for China group of the island also take advantage of Taiwan's democracy using both traditional and the social media to denigrate many already victims and the government's effort to publicize the historical facts. Has been there is a strong revisionist in social media just 2-3 years. Therefore, it blocks the public from learning the truth. This is the style of the cognitive warfare, which would further encroach on Taiwanese people's resistance to in pursuit of liberty and democracy. Taiwan has a strategic importance in global supply chain, particularly in the semiconductor industry and in the physical Western Pacific. Thus, any cognitive warfare and any doubts that it generates to damage to Taiwanese people's identity resolution to stay in the democratic camp will be a loss of the war. I'm sorry.
Just tell me where you go.
Let's get around the PPT.
Yeah. You know which slide you're on?
You just let go
Okay.
automatically. Thank you. Last year, 2022, marks the 7th anniversary of the formal implementation of San Francisco Peace Treaty with Japan. But in this peace treaty, ROC and the PRC didn't attend the peace conference. Why? Because, in my opinion, KMT or the government of ROC didn't prove they are capable to govern good governance. Taiwan. So the Allied power didn't give Taiwan and the Pescatory Islands to China, means ROC or PRC. Because in the war of Britannic, they say Taiwanese people are too petty to deprive the rights, the human rights and the democracy. So and then also of the chapter 2 of this book, and I developed the argument of the Taiwan's international legal studies. That's why I speak of the San Francisco Peace Treaty with Japan. In the chapter 2 of this peace treaty, Article 2 and section second B point only say Japan abandoned any right of Taiwan and the Pescatory Islands. They didn't say they give Taiwan or Pescatory to any country. And that's why in the international society, we don't have a nationality. After 1971, but actually the government of the ROC, it's an occupant force. in Taiwan. They are not recognized. They have the sovereignty of the island. Yeah, please let go. That's signed by Chinese representative in Missouri battleship. Please go ahead. Yeah, the same person. And the instrument of surrender, etc. Please. In Nanjing, the Minister of National Defense, Wei Yingqin, and the plan of occupation of Taiwan. That means it's a military occupation, just like USSR occupied the north of Korea, or the United States occupied the south of Korea, or China occupied the north of Indochina. The same role. Go ahead, please. The Antolitki. And actually, that's mean the procedure of the acceptance of the surrender. And also, the occupant force as the United States. So they have a Formosa liaison group of USA in Taiwan. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. So Chinese, they are aware of their role of this acceptance of surrender. They only have the right of occupation. They don't have the right of sovereignty. So, I mean, in legal jargon, occupation does not transfer sovereignty. That's the international law, and it's only a temporary administrative by the occupying power. Please. Please go ahead. Many international textbooks, international law textbooks citing the same idea. It occupy does not transfer the sovereignty. Please. Power which assume sovereignty over the occupied territory is thereafter responsible for all events of international importance of territory. Okay. That's the idea of sovereignty. Please. Please go ahead. But when KMT came to Taiwan, they have a triple control. That means they sentence a martial law, the military administration, and the provisional regulation. That means they freeze the constitution or any human rights. That's the first committee of Chinese and Japanese in Taiwan in 1945. October, please, please go back. Yeah, please go back. Yeah, we have 4 flags. That means this is occupied by the allied power. That means Soviet, United States, Chinese, and British. Comes from the first camp of the 70th Army, sent by United States. Please. That's the image of the Chinese soldier in Taiwanese people. Because Japanese army are very good training, not like Chinese troop. Please go ahead. Please go. When Taiwanese welcome Chinese troop, they don't know how this look the flag, Chinese flag. So they make it inverse the reverse. Please go ahead. Please. Next. Use reverse slide, basically. You can see there some signature of the United States people, official. And we also have the flag, four nations flag. Please go. British, Chinese, United States, and British. Please go. We have the representative of the American official. Please go. Please go ahead. Just like I said, Chinese people welcome Chinese, the coming of Chinese, but quickly they disappointed. Next, please. Please. So, next. Please, go ahead. In this book, I cite some opinion of the United States and the British newspaper. Some example. Please go ahead. The New York Times. Go ahead. China Weekly is published in Shanghai. Please. The Washington Post. other countries. Baltimore, Pittsburgh phrase. And the British Council, Mr. Tingle, he say it's a mean intentional massacre of a generation of elites, Taiwanese elites. That's London, the Times of London, and Manchester Guardian, their opinion. It's good. It's a telegram from Chiang Kai-shek to the Governor in General of Taiwan, Chen Cheng. He say Taiwan is just a trustee territory of China. You cannot say you want to treat the Taiwan province as the base to be unify the China. If you say so, they will people will laugh at you. Your ignorance of international law is good. And 6 months later, Chiang Kai-shek changed his mind. He said, we will define Taiwan as secure our territory and fulfill our mission duty and will not send it over to the allies. That means it's no more a trustee territory. It's become his own his own. So quickly, 5 months later, the whole mainland China are in the span of communist. It's so outbreak of a Korean War saved Taiwan, and the next is the conference of San Francisco. In Article 2, Japan has renounced all right, title, claim to Formosa and the pescadores. Is going. The attitude of Japan is the treaty was not a recognition of the right of the national government to represent China. That's very clear. And also, the United States has the same attitude. This next. Please go ahead. Okay. sorry for my presentation. So
No need to apologize at all. No, that was incredibly informative. I mean, I think it's easy with historical events to kind of view them in a vacuum. And I think you did a great job of, providing so much historical context, international context to show that this, there are a lot of factors, a lot of different threads that led to the 228 massacre, as you say, and had ramifications that went on for years. So I do want to turn now to Mike to respond. He's been working with Taiwan for years, has spent a lot of time in Taiwan. I want to give you a chance to join the discussion and provide your own thoughts here. So Mike, over to you.
Well, thanks very much for the presentations and for this opportunity. I actually lived in Taiwan from 1967 to 1970, which was the heart of martial law time. I lived in central Taiwan, Taiwan, Changhua, Miamitis, on the seacoast. And the best way I can describe the feeling tone was all there. I went to the Catholic group thinking we would do social justice work and organizing, and found out very quickly that if you did that, you get people in trouble, also for martial law fans. So I left after 3 years thinking that, well, I thought there would be no possibilities here. And I went to the University of Michigan to get a degree. Luckily, Hong Mei-min was there then, and Lim Zong-yi. Lim Zong-yi's father was one of the gentlemen who had sat down with the Chinese in 1947, tried to prepare conditions they want to see happen in negotiation. And what the Chinese did, which was in all of this historical memory, was they waited for the troops to come, and then they rounded up anybody who signed that piece of paper. And so it's a very important to understand the feeling tone among native Taiwanese for the repression, this sense of oppression, the sense of silence that was imposed, and why at that time when they killed, again, not clear, 28,000, it was really the cream of the crop in many ways. Intelligentsia people who were smart enough, had been educated enough to be able to write out conditions that they wanted to see. So this is an impact, a long-term impact on Taiwan's development when you took out a whole level of the educated class, right? And so it was very important to experience that. I have here one of my favorite remembrances. Lim Zong-yi's daughter was Lim Hyuk-won, a friend of mine, still a good friend. She's a doctor in Seattle now. She gave me this book, which was written actually by her great-grandfather. He did the Chinese characters in this book. It's a amyloid dialect, they say, actually, Hokkien dialect. And I think Dr. Lim Zong-yi's experience was so traumatic. To his dying day, his daughter told me, he was still saying that he was terrified that he had not been able to go and save his father when his father was being picked up. And that's the kind of impact, personal, sophisticated impact it had on so many people. And I experienced that with a number of my friends. Two of my teachers when I was studying Holo were Waseda University graduates. They had studied in Japan. These are gentlemen who were well educated, weren't allowed to speak their own language. They weren't allowed to speak Japanese, right? And learn Mandarin. So the impact, the long-term impact of 228 was pretty traumatic in terms of the psychology, I think, of a lot of Taiwanese, but also the development of Taiwan. We didn't talk about it here, but I'm sure you want to talk a little bit about the way the Chinese took the assets and made it their own, right? What happened when the Chinese came, they took everything the Japanese had control of and made them, which were state assets, right? Made them part of their portfolio, became the party's assets, and so was one of the richest parties in the world. And they used that over the course of time to do their party building. So I think those are aspects which maybe you want to talk a little bit more about, the asset recovery, how important that is for Taiwan's development. But also, I think how Taiwanese have gotten beyond this feeling of bi Taiwan, right? The sorrow of being Taiwanese. Li Dongwei used this phrase that there's a great deep sorrow of being Taiwanese, and it comes out of this experience, right? Having seen 30,000, who knows how many of your best and brightest being murdered or disappeared. And so it took a long time. And I think part of what you're doing in the book is helping to surface that, but also give people hope for the future. I think that's, so I'd like, if you have any comments about that, I think that's an important aspect. That is the psychological impact, but also what's being done both for rehabilitation of victims, which is key, identifying the perpetrators, but also talking about the assets question and deal with some of that.
I'd like to make a note. Kim Jong-il's father, Kim Mao-sung in Washington, is the first feminist who got PhD in Columbia University in 1920s. 31? Yes. Thanks.
Judge Chin, do you want to respond to that? Either the question about kind of the psychological impact and how transitional justice kind of helps to, transfer that sorrow of being Taiwanese to, to a modern, more optimistic look going forward. How does transitional justice help with that? And also talk about, the ill-gotten assets issue and the seizure of assets that the KMT undertook, in its early years and how that's being rectified.
Yeah, I just want a very short response from place with sending comments. I think you mentioned very important issues about this was why we have to talk about today's recent or more precisely say massacre each year. I mean, why Taiwanese society have to commemorate the today massacre in each year continually. This was, yes, I think the sociology impact still really strongly remained in Taiwan society. And I just want to share everyone's my personal experience for you, and as my response to your for your comment. I come from the victims' families. I come from Western family. So when my parents knew that I will prepare to work for the foundation, the 22A, Mental Foundation 22A, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 and 5 years ago, they helped me to be thinking about. They help me to. They recommend me not to work for this foundation because until today they still afraid that I will be involved with those terrible past. I will maybe they hope they worry about maybe I will be. So yeah, so this is my personal story. So I think so for me, the sociology impact still very strongly influence myself and my family. This is my response. Yeah, sorry, I have to mention a name, Liu Bang. Liu Bang is my grandma's father. Great-grandma's father. And when Liu Bang died in the 1950s, the KMT government didn't allow the family members to, how to say that, to took the dead body back to home. And my because he is my grandmother's beloved brother. So my great-grandmother was very brave to take his brother's dead body, bring it home, and to held a very simple funeral for his lovely brother. And my great-grandfather, when I was 10, my great-grandmother was died when I was 10. I mean, I have enough time to live with her, but I never heard about any story about his brother. I was child. So that's my response. Thanks.
That's very common, right? We don't speak about any of that stuff. I was there 67 to 70. My teachers were all native Taiwanese, of course. But they would never speak about this except when we were far away in a corner somewhere, nobody around because you're worried about spies. I mean, this is really a deep psychological impact for that time. For those of you who go to Taiwan, you should go to the Peace Park and the 228 Peace Park. There's a wonderful, what you call it, like a memorial there. This is an amazing story. He was one of the guys that tried to assassinate Jiang Jingguo. And he was that fierce in terms of having experienced the terrors of 228 and wanting to get back at it. He actually was in jail for a while. He escaped, right? I think he went off to England or somewhere. Came back, but he was the architect who built this memorial. And it's when you go, you should go to the Peace Park. I do it every time I go to Taiwan. Just stand there. It's a very profound experience if you know this history. And say a prayer, whatever you do in those situations, it's up to you. But what I found interesting is the inscription that he wrote said, mistrust between Taiwanese and mainlanders, and the argument as to whether Taiwan should declare independence or be united with China have become hot issues with potentially worrisome implications. The task of healing a serious trauma in a society must depend on the wholehearted collaboration effort of all its people. So you see this attempt to get beyond the distinction between Bunsenlam and Guasenlam. Let's hope that these words will serve as a warning and a lesson to all Taiwanese compatriots. Henceforth, we must be one, no matter what communal group we belong to. We must help each other with compassion and treat each other with sincerity. We must dissolve hatred and resentment, bring about long-lasting peace. May heaven bless Taiwan and keep it evergreen. There's a place there you can put your hands in the memorial. There's a handprint, and you can feel the energy of this amazing. It's been an amazing experience, but again, we're moving beyond it. That's what the museum is trying to educate. But how do we get beyond that? And one of the things that I think you need to know if you're studying Taiwanese history is so many of the people who are supportive of Taiwanese independence come out of this incredibly terrifying experience of having seen hope ripped away from them. And now they're trying to instill it for the future, right? So Taiwan Doglet, a lot of people want that official recognition. Now it's complicated by what Professor Xu has said about the San Francisco Peace Treaty, who has sovereignty. Those are important kinds of questions, but it comes off of this history here. It's very important. But I do recommend that you go to the Peace Park if you get to Taiwan and just stand there and say a prayer or something.
I certainly agree. It is a fantastic park. I do want to follow up on that a little bit and talk a bit about that process of healing. That, the way you described it is sort of, it's so quiet for so long, pushed away for so long, and now it's rising back to the surface. And I do want to ask Dr. Chen and Dr. Xu, how do things currently stand? Where are we in the healing process right now? We talk about moving forward, moving past these tragedies. For people in Taiwan right now, particularly for younger people who are far removed from this, how does this factor into their sense of identity? Where are people in the process of healing? Sorry, but
Cool.
Actually, I'd like to say independence movement of Taiwan just come from the 228 massacre. Because as I just said, Taiwanese, they feel they are not Japanese, they are not Chinese, so they want to be Taiwanese, the Taiwanese themselves. So in Japan or in the United States, each year there will be demonstration. Maybe I should say for those who born after 80s, 1980s, there's no more martial law, so they didn't feel the feeling of fear. So they feel they are Taiwanese, the most of them. So when the Shanghai Communique of the 1972 say the Chinese of two sides of the strait, but now the other side, the one side in Taiwan, there are so few Chinese. Most of the people in Taiwan, they are Taiwanese. So we have a investigation 1980s to this year. Every year there is the same question, same investigation for the Taiwanese. Who are you? You are Taiwanese or Chinese, or in the same time Taiwanese and Chinese. Now, the most of people they say they are Taiwanese. 70%, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, Chen, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. Okay, I think this very important question. When I work for the 228 Foundation, even my parents didn't despite this job that I mentioned earlier. One of my important job was to become a guider. To guide the 228 Institute to those visitors. And I noticed that in the weekend, there are a lot of young students, young generation will come to our museums automatically. They are not be forced to come here. They are very aggressive to positively to visit our museum and they want to know the history about the Tutu incident and the more precisely speaking, the history history of the in transitional justice, because we did not in our museum we didn't only display the exhibition about the Tutu incident, but the display the exhibition about the arts of the Taiwanese history and the indigenous people of Taiwan. So what I want to say is, I think, as I mentioned earlier by Professor Xu Yuantang, if you take a look about the identity pooling in the current Taiwan, the young generation, the most of the young generation will told you that I am Taiwanese people. I am not Chinese. I reject to be a Chinese. So they share a totally different about identity with, for example, my generation. I belong to the 40 generation. They are 30, they are 20. So what I want to say is when they consider that they are Chinese, they are Taiwanese people, they are Taiwanese, they are not Chinese. So they have to work to do. They have to build in their own history, the national history. So if you consider Taiwan as an independent country, so what is your country's history? Okay, So the modern Chinese, modern Chinese history is a part of Taiwanese history or not? Or how should we feel about those history happening in Taiwan, and what history can contribute you to build your own country's history. So for instance, Buddha master here play a very important role because as mentioned by the professor Xu and Michael earlier, the total instance inspired Taiwanese people to start thinking a very important issue: who am I? Because in Taiwan, when Taiwan was ruled by the Japanese, Taiwanese people maybe they will accept, okay, I'm Japanese people, but however, the Japanese people not treat me equal. The Japanese government, the Japanese colonial administration treats Taiwanese people as second class, the civilian class. Even Taiwan has been modernized by the Japanese during the Japanese rule period. So that was why Taiwanese show their welcome to the KMT government or to the Chinese government when the World War II ended. Because Taiwanese people exactly they are very happy to free from colonial rule. So, but again, when Taiwanese people, oh my God, the Chinese people also treat me very bad. So who am I? I'm not Japanese people. I'm not Chinese. So who am I? If I would like to claim that I'm Chinese. I'm Chinese. But Chinese can be an independent nation. So what was our nation's history? So to the instance, play a very important issue. Play a very important role to build their own history. So in the weekend, I often have the opportunity to talk about with those young generations, and they will show their very positive attitude to learn those the history, and I also want to highlight another very important dimension for you is that they are not satisfied with those textbooks which they learning in their school, because those textbooks, the content of the historical textbook in Taiwan, in the middle school, in the high school right now, it doesn't teaching enough information, for example, about the total instance or about the transitional justice. Yeah, they still not mention about who should take the responsibility of the total instance. I think this is why they often come to my museum to try to finding out who should take the responsibility. Why our foundation, we published a Chinese book in 2007. We point out that Chiang Kai-shek should take the responsibility, and we also mention the reason. Yeah, so yeah.
Great. Well, I'm so glad to hear, the memory of this event is still alive and well among the younger generations. I know that's always part of that, kind of flame burning. And it's interesting hearing that the sort of links between the event and national identity and kind of framing it as sort of an inflection point in what it means to be Taiwanese. Well, I want to turn it over, I think we've talked enough. I want to turn it over to the audience now. Before we go, I do want to, for all of our people that are watching online, remind you that we welcome your questions just as well. If you have a question for us, feel free to send it to the YouTube chat box, to our email, or on Twitter. So if anybody has a question in the audience, we're happy to answer. Yeah. If you could just say your name and your affiliation as well, that'd be great.
And then from there, I have a big question that I wonder what's the people's or the public's reaction when you try to introduce your book to them. What will they react, and then you sell your idea to them today? What is the positive attitude, negative attitude, or just try to talk you into? Just forget about that. I wonder if you have encountered such experience, what is the current takeaway that you have based on experience so far?
Great. Well, for our audience members online, if you were unable to hear that, the question is really, how have people reacted? How have people that when you've presented this book to other audiences, how has it been received in Taiwan? What have people said? Have they responded well to your argument? I'd be interested to hear as well.
I would like to answer the question first. I would like to right away. Okay. But very short. Very easy. I think this depends on generation. If you are a generation under 40, you will be very try to exciting to know those history which is not mentioned in the textbook. Okay, or those which dimension which they not be teaching when they study at the school. Okay, for example, I mentioned, for example, in the chapter 6, we use a lot of the intelligence materials to describe how the intelligence agency to play the role for example, to launching the secret killing or the through those intelligence agency materials. We realize why somebody be killed and when they be killed and what reason they be killed. But of course, there are a lot of victims why they be killed is still unknown. Okay, and this is for the generation. So they are very eager for this book. And for the generation, they who are 40, 50, 60, okay, they have no opportunity to learn to the instant when they study in school. So exactly, they even have no idea about what is to the instant. So I also like to share you my personal story. This time I come to Washington DC and I'm staying here. Start from the last week, I stay in my relative house. Who was my cousin? Who was be a lawyer in Washington DC? Who was 40 generation. And in one day night when we are eating, we are enjoying the dinner party. She asked me, "Yeah, can you tell me what is today? What was today's?" He had really no idea about today's, and she told me that his friends who stay in the United States who also belong to the 50 generation, 60 generation, and also asked him maybe can you teach me what is the things your nephew was work for the foundation with her. So I think this is problem here. I think so, and I deliver my book, lended my book to her, and even to his husband. His husband was American, was born in America, and worked for American University, and they are very feel exciting to read the book because his especially his husband cannot read Chinese already. Especially special the difficult Chinese character. So they can do this book. They can very become an important channel to them, to my family who stay in the United States to understand what is today's. What was today's? That's my response. Thanks.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's so interesting that it has different, reactions from different generations. And it's great that you guys have translated it to English as well to reach out to the overseas Taiwanese community and the broader English speaking world. Are there any other questions? Oh, yeah.
My name is Paul Jacob, with a group called Liberty Initiative Fund. When I traveled to Taiwan 4 years ago, I went to an event and knew nothing about Taiwanese history. In fact, most of what I knew wasn't true. So it was even worse than knowing nothing. And reading in history, I was kind of amazed that Taiwan was an island and people lived there long before the history that I knew. And one of the things that I hear most often from people who were ignorant as I was is that, really Taiwan's just China, but they split over the Civil War. And knowing about 228 shows that to be, not really accurate. That this was not a reunification in the sense that there was a huge difference and violence erupted. And reading Formosa Betrayed really kind of added to, some essential knowledge. It also made me embarrassed to be an American because we played no positive role. I'll get to a question here in a second. But, when I think about Taiwan, I think this is the most compelling story of moving from totalitarianism, basically totalitarianism, to freedom in modern times. And it was done with the US all around, but of absolutely no help. And so I think it's an important story for Americans to know about. And I guess really the question, other than that I'm glad you wrote this book, is where do you get this book? And because I'd like to get a copy and share with friends.
Yeah. Do you have any books with you?
Oh, yeah. Okay. We prepare the copies for all the friends who come in today. Yeah.
It's a simple story, but I think it plays to your question. There were Americans in government as well as people like George Kerr who saw and tried to help. One was a guy named Mark Pratt, who was in government. We had an embassy at that point. And what happened to a lot of victims, where they would be shunned by their neighbors, because if your husband or somebody was in jail or had been killed, you were a person you shouldn't be associated with. So he began to try to get people to join hands to help those families. I mean, it's simple gestures, but very important. And then there were other people who tried to push the United States to push Chiang Kai-shek and Jiang Jingguo beyond where they were. So it's an interesting history. And of course, part of the history that Professor Hsu laid out was the San Francisco Peace Treaty, which basically left the situation of the sovereignty undetermined. And that's basically US position now. That's why we, the United States, can have an unofficial relationship with Taiwan that's very strong and deep, but not quite a recognition, right? I mean, it's a complicated story we could talk about some other time. It's important to understand that there is strong link to Taiwan, but it's made difficult by the relationship with the PRC. What's happened? That fact that it's undetermined by the San Francisco Peace Treaty, the Japanese did not give, there was no beneficiary there. So nobody received the right, including nobody like Chiang Kai-shek and speaker.
All right. Well, are there any other questions from the audience? Yeah, right over here.
My name is William Ting. There's first time I have three related questions really quick. Did the tragic spirit of 228 tragedy inspire the sunflower? My second question is, did the tragic history of the 228 incident inspire the Hong Kong protest? And number three, did the spirit of the 228 incident help President Tsai with a very, very important re-election at a time when Taiwan was facing its most critical decision of a pro-China slant or its own identity? In other words, is it fair to say that the spirit of 228 is alive?
So for our audience that are online, if you couldn't hear that, great questions, hard questions. Three questions, one, basically all linked together by, is the spirit of 228 still alive today? Is it still influencing current events? Whether it influenced the sunflower movement in Taiwan, whether it influenced the umbrella protests in Hong Kong and the subsequent ones in 2019, and then President Tsai's re-election in 2020. So I'd definitely be curious.
Okay, I can give you a very quick response. I remember maybe 4 years ago, our museum have held a special exhibition to display with the main topic. This was to pass Taiwan to test Hong Kong. It means 228 incident, 228 happened, in 75 years at that time, 70 1 year ago, and those tragedy represented in Hong Kong. Also, we compare the Judaism and the umbrella movement, and we try to give we try to display a feeling about that exactly. If you think Judaism, the Judaism is past, then you find no, it's not past, it's still alive, and the Judaism repeat again in Hong Kong, and that shows that if a country rule a civilized country, for example, like Taiwan, like Hong Kong, those people, those areas, or those areas, those people has been educated, well educated, by communists, and however, they ruled a new, they accept a new regime, which was, I don't know this is correct, but such kind of term in English is correct or not, uncivilized regime, or not, the regime always didn't know how to respect human rights, or the behavior of the regime always against the human rights, democratic or liberal. So then the tragedy will happen. And exactly, can you turn to my PowerPoint? Sorry, I just want to show you a very quick, very important information. But it's okay. Because everybody wants to talk about why the Taiwan isn't were opened in the 1947. Sorry, my point. Yeah, so I would like to the next one. Yeah, down, please. Please. Okay. Sorry. The institutional aspect. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Exactly, it's very ironic. Since the previous year of the 2008, the ROC government state declared the ROC constitution, and the state that the constitution was based on liberty, democracy, and human rights. However, in the following year, the two things happened, and I think the Taiwanese people, for Taiwanese people, the most cannot accept is that all the government behavior during the Tutor incident were not followed by the rule of law, and I mean those victims and their family, those victims will be killed or arrested without due process. So that was why, as Professor Xu one time mentioned earlier, if you ask me how many people died during the Tutor incident, I didn't give you a correct answer because since too many people was killed was arrested or killed without due process. So even today we didn't know where was his or her dead body. So we even know he or her or she was be killed. So this was why it's always very difficult to calculate, to estimate how many people died during the Tuesday incident. So I think this is a very important information here. That was before the Tuesday incident, the regime, ROC government or KMT government declared the country will run based on liberty, democracy, and human rights in the future. Then the following year, the Tuesday incident happened. Okay, that's my response. Thanks.
Great.
Well, that both the Sunflower Movement and the Hong Kong movement come from the long stream of students' activism in the Chinese history. So I think there's more to that link perhaps than 228 per se, but clearly for the Sunflower Movement, what they were worried about was this increased impact of Chinese influence because of the trade and relations, et cetera, and they didn't want to see that happen So I think it gets back to the point that was raised, which is when the Chiang Kai-shek folks first came to Taiwan, they were pretty much welcomed as liberators. We're not, we're not Japanese, but soon found out very differently. And I think that's the motivation. And so particularly for President Tsai, when she ran against Han Kuo-yu, who was very kind of leaning China way, there was a very sharp distinction between her position and his. So I think that's where the impact is. It's more on this, are you Taiwanese or Chinese, and how does that play out in the real world?
Well, again, I have many more questions, but I certainly don't want to keep you all any longer. We're already a little bit over time. But I want to thank all of you for doing such a good job on, shedding light on this. And I encourage you all to continue to follow the work of the Memorial Foundation of 228. I think as they made very clear, this is not a completed process. The process of transitional justice is not one that just comes to an end. It's something that continues on, transforms over time, and civil society organizations like yourself, things like the Transitional Justice Commission, working internationally are so crucial and are so important to the formation of Taiwanese identity, to the modern Taiwanese state. So again, I want to thank you guys for coming all this way and for sharing your book with us and sharing your thoughts with us. And Mike, I want to thank you too for bringing your own insights. And thank you all for joining us today.
Yes,